Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Tracy Bennett. In studio with me are certified financial planners Tyler Cook and Tony Payne. And today we're going to be talking to parents. We're going to be talking about 529s, scholarships, smart moves when your child gets a big win. So I want to kind of talk about what a 529 is for those who don't really understand letter soup and number soup. So let's go there first.
Yeah. 529 is a form of a college savings plan with a lot of tax benefits. Most states have their own 529 plan. So here in Ohio, there's a great plan. A couple different options, so you got to be careful which ones you pick. But the idea is you can put money in on a tax-deductible basis at the state level, grow that money by investing it on a tax-deferred basis, and then when the time comes to take money out for higher education, we'll come more back to that in a minute because they've changed the rules on these. But when you take the money out to pay for school, it's tax-free. So it's called triple tax advantage. Deduction up front, tax-deferred growth, tax-free withdrawals.
And when I think about it, too, I just have to go back to the basics. You know, where do I get one is usually the first question.
You just read my mind.
Where do I start? And like Tyler said, each state may have one, but, the state doesn't have it by themselves. They'll usually have a sponsor. Mm-hmm. So it might be a Vanguard, a Fidelity, someone like that. Or they might have one that's advisor sold that you need to go through an advisor to get access to.
Okay.
So either one may be good for you depending upon how you're handling your business or what you're looking for.
We were just talking to the producers earlier about this whole subject. I missed the opportunity. I waited. Mine grew up before I even started working here, sadly. But you can actually have young kids, right? And still, it's not like a birth preparation plan. It's, you can, if your kids are young, you can kind of do that as well, right?
Yeah, any age. You can have adults going back to grad school, and you can have a 529. Oh. There's a lot of flexibility with it.
Okay. And it's purely for education.
So that's where it's changed over the years. Back when Tony and I first started doing financial planning, it was strictly higher education or nothing. They've now changed the rules where they open the door for K through 12 expenses, so private schooling, think of that. You can even buy things like a computer for it. So it's not just paying tuition. There's a lot of flexibility with the plans. And recently, as last year, I believe, they changed the law to where, let's say there's money left over in the account once your kid finishes school, or maybe they got a scholarship so they didn't need all the money. You can actually take a portion of that and roll it over into a Roth IRA for your child and jumpstart their retirement. There's, of course, some limitations on that and some other rules, but they've really opened the door to make it more flexible than what it used to be 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, a lot of people, really the accountants, I think, were talking about the penalty if you overfunded it. So if you overfunded it, let's say your child had a scholarship, you didn't need the funds in the 529, and you didn't use them for a qualified expense. Well, if you went to take those out to pay for your boat or something, you were going to pay a 10% penalty on the growth in the account. Mm-hmm. So you were able to get your contribution back. You were able to basically pay income tax on the earnings and the penalty on the earnings, but you still kept that money. So a lot of people, I think, got really fearful about that, worried about overfunding it. Mm-hmm. But as Tyler was sharing, there's a lot more creative options, too. You can pay for things even beyond that to think about, well, what about a trade school? What about some of the things that may be associated with that?
That's fantastic.
You think about something like whether it was acupuncture, whether it was a massage school, whether it was a tattoo or airbrushing. A lot of the trades where you might need equipment, those are things where it might be a qualified expense if you're in a qualified program.
That's awesome.
I think the big thing, too, with 529s is the parent is in control the whole way through.
If they own it.
Correct. Yes. If the parent owns the account,
so it
sets
goes
it
in
up.
the parent's name, not the kid's name.
Correct. And there's not a switch either where some other custodial type accounts, once the kid reaches the age of majority, it becomes their money. Parents lose all control.
Okay.
529, you as the parent call the shots.
Now, if somebody's, just announcing that they're getting ready to have a child, can you open the account at that point? Is it too early?
No, you can actually open one now. The strategy would be opening an account, picking a beneficiary for who's going to receive the money, and then you can also go in and change the beneficiary once your child's born. So you can actually
grandparents
fund
open one?
Absolutely.
So anybody can open one?
Yes, and a great benefit for grandparents and other relatives is they can make the contributions to your account and still get the tax deduction on their end.
So fewer teddy bears at birthday time.
If there's a tax deduction in your state and they qualify.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're in Texas and Florida, obviously not an issue because there's no state income tax.
Check with the CPA first.
Yeah. And even the idea of taking those qualified distributions for K through 12 those are limited to that $10,000 a year. But if you're being strategic about it, you can plan how you're putting money in, when you're putting it in, so that way you're able to take the maximum benefit of use it now, but also have a portion growing for later, because that's the trade-off sometimes, putting money in there, taking out a little too soon maybe.
Okay. So that's for the average scenario. So what about if your kid gets a scholarship?
Yay!
Yeah, great problems, right? Yeah. I think the big one there would be, first of all, do you have other children? Because to what I mentioned about changing the beneficiary, if little Jimmy gets a full ride and the other child needs the money, you can change the beneficiary to the child who doesn't have the scholarship. So the money stays in the household. It's repurposed for another child. You're still winning on the tax side as well.
Nice. What about any penalties?
I want to talk about the penalty because we've seen this play out in practice. Even so, somebody starts at child's at birth, right? It's just so say just at day one, and you get to age 18 when you're ready to start entering school. We've seen the scenarios where the accounts are overfunded, and this was prior to the rules of being able to roll it over into a Roth IRA. So
I need to stop you when you say overfunded.
Meaning
what's the max?
Those good.
Well, the idea is what Tyler's saying is, again, what the accountants might say. There's no such thing as overfunded. You can have an account and limits on what you put into it, and the limits are typically, I believe it's $300,000, just above that now, in 1 year. But depending upon the cost of college as well, you may be able to exceed that. But the idea is, overfunded is, well, if I have money in there that I didn't need for college, will my family ever need higher education expenses? Well, if they will, it may not be overfunded. You know, I love the idea of thinking about the 529 as almost a family trust for education, because there's no other, especially if you're a high income earner or you have some assets, there's really no other way that you can earn money. Like, Tyler, you jumped into it, the triple tax benefits here, but we'll explain each one of those. But one of those is tax deferred growth while the money's in there growing. So if that child was 18, they didn't need the money, they were in the military, things were covered. Well, you could leave that in there for another 18 years. Perhaps they have children, then that money's grown even greater. And when you take it out for schooling, there's no penalty. It's a qualified expense. So the idea of something being overfunded, to me, that means you put money in there you probably shouldn't have in the first place. You know, if you weren't funding your retirement or you were in bad debt and you need access to that money, that's when you might have put the education first and you needed that money back.
That's amazing. So it can act as a legacy account as long as you're changing the beneficiaries, right?
Yeah, and in several scenarios we've seen, even after taking the hit on the penalty, you're still so far ahead because of all that tax-deferred growth for 15, 20 years that it didn't really matter. You paid the penalty, so what? Your growth, if you look at what you put in versus what it's worth, subtract the penalty, you're still winning.
And you mentioned I'm going to break it down, Tyler, with you. So the first tax benefit is?
Tax deduction. So a state tax deduction when you make the contribution, to your point, assuming you have a state income tax to offset. Here in Ohio, currently, it's $4,000 per beneficiary. So if you have 5 kids, that could be $20,000. If you put $4,000 in for each kid, that's you're reducing your state tax liability by.
It's a great tool. And then the next tax benefit?
The tax deferred growth. So that's the investment piece. And many of these plans have a lot of choices. You can pick age-based options where it can grow kind of in sync with what the child's education timeline would be. So, for example, when they're younger, it's more aggressive, more stocks. As they get closer to needing the money, just like retirement, the allocation automatically becomes more conservative. So you don't have things in volatility going up and down, a little more safety in there. There's still risk, of course, with any of those types of things. But the idea there's kind of a glide path or a trajectory to get you to that goal. And so the growth between that time is what we call about tax deferred growth, because you're not paying tax each year. It's just growing in the account. And then the third benefit is when you go to take the money out to actually pay for things, a qualified education expense.
I love this one.
Tax-free.
Can we first stop and talk about the difference between qualified and non-qualified?
Yeah, there's a whole list, and you can Google this, look it up on the IRS website. Again, one I mentioned earlier was the computer. You could actually buy a computer with tax-deductible, tax-free money. Pretty incredible. Tuition, room and board, other expenses. Not beer money. Can't use it for that. Yeah, you're out on that one, Trace. But the point being is there's a lot of options, and the list keeps growing. So I think the government has recognized the need to expand the benefits versus reduce them. And I don't see that trend changing. And
there are some creative ideas out there. We won't go into all of them, but the idea of, you know, if you could use that money to pay for housing or room and board on campus, not like you said, maybe not beer money, but maybe that meal plan or that package.
Right.
Well, what if you're living off campus? You can use some of that money either towards an apartment or housing, towards some of the food bill. So there are creative ways out there. We try not to be aggressive on that stuff, but we're aware of them. And usually when you do that kind of thing, you're putting usually something else, taxes or something else ahead of the goal of, I want to pay for my kids' college.
Yeah, the truth of it, too, is on the back end, the IRS puts the onus on the account owner to track the expenses. It's not like a pre-approval type thing. It's you have to keep receipts, do it correctly. So that's on the taxpayer, so the account owner.
Oh, that's good to know.
And the parent needs to be making sure they're tracking that.
Okay. Does it make sense for everybody to fold this type of account into their retirement planning as long as the other buckets have been taken care of?
I think that's the key, right? Do you
mean,
have your cash reserve? Are you making your contributions? And are you on track to hit your other goals? This would definitely, I think you agree, be a secondary goal.
Because even if you don't have kids, if you have a best friend who does, and maybe you want to pay for their college or contribute to their college, you could actually open this account by what you're saying to me. I could open an account for my girlfriend's grandchild.
Yep.
And even if I put a minimum amount into it, it's still a gift.
Yep. That's one way.
And I decide when she gets it?
Yes, that's it. If you wanted to be in control, you would do it that way. The other strategy would be, then they've made this so easy now. They have a QR code that they create. You can actually send a QR code to your family. That's what I've done with saying, hey, my kids don't need any more toys or fancy things.
That's a great
Here's the
idea.
code if you want to help out. Here's the contribution. And you can actually still get the tax deduction, even though it's not your account. It would be my account. You make the contribution to it, but you get the tax deduction, assuming you're qualified for that.
I'm showing my age, but it's sort of tantamount to, I don't know if you guys ever got EE bonds when you were a kid.
Oh, yeah.
From your grandparents.
It's from selling candy door to door.
Right?
Yeah.
It's sort of a similar concept, only better, right? Accelerated.
Yeah.
So what happens? I mean, just somebody gets the scholarship, they're awarded a scholarship. Do they have to take all the money out the same year they get the scholarship? Or can they pace themselves throughout the school?
Yeah, there's no mandatory withdrawal requirements on the 529, so you can take as much or as little out as you want.
Okay, and that can work in tandem with student loans if they exist.
It sure could.
That's a new feature, yeah.
Okay, and I think we're going to get to that. I think I've got a talk point to that. But
the reason
it just
why I
came
was
to my mind.
Jumping in was there are other accounts that existed before the 529. You mentioned double E bonds. That used to be a great way to think about tax-deferred growth and a stable way to get money for college for someone for the future. Well, then there were also accounts called Coverdales. And these Coverdale IRAs were also education IRAs or available for education. So you might have one of those hanging around still, or someone might have set one of those up. And those were more of you have to use it by this age. I believe it was age 30 and a half, depending upon whether you were in school. A couple qualifiers, but the idea there was you had to use it or take it out. With the 529, what we're talking about, you can change it generationally even and be able to keep that money in there.
Does it have to be for a younger person, or can you open a 529 for yourself if you ever wanted to go back to school?
Yeah.
Would that make sense?
Sure, if you want to play the tax game and get your deductions, you certainly could do that.
And especially if you are someone thinking about, hey, I may re-enter the workforce, change my career. It's, again, another way to have some funds there. Think about an emergency reserve for your education. Again, most people may not feel like they have that extra. They've got to fund the reserve first. Hopefully, you have that funded reserve, and then these doors open.
So I'm jumping ahead, and I've got other things to talk about, but I'll forget if I don't ask you. So if you have somebody who has opened one of these accounts for a loved one or a friend's loved one, or yourself, at what point, what happens to it when you pass away? Is it just it's beneficiaried over to somebody?
Yeah, there's a successor owner. If you've done it correctly, you've listed a successor owner to take over the account.
Okay, that's cut and dry.
Still, the kids are still the beneficiary. There's another adult or your spouse, surviving spouse would likely become the survivor.
Okay, good to know. What about leftover funds? This point in my research talks about giving leftover 529 funds to the other kid or saving it for a grandchild. Can you kind of chop it up that way?
Yeah. There's a lot of flexibility with that. So again, you're in complete control with who you want to list to be the beneficiary of the account.
Okay, I need to understand this. So I open a 529. I've got 4 kids. They're stair steps, and maybe I have a grandkid.
Yep.
And there's there's $100,000 in it.
We
don't like to do numbers, but let's just give people a visual.
Yeah, even there, I think we can start to paint
older
the picture.
child starts to hit the road towards college. I can funnel as much as I want towards that effort, right? And can retain the rest of it for others, or am I locked into making contributions to their education in a certain amount?
So to break it down, each of them is an individual. So each of them can have an individual account, and that's the cleanest way we think to do it. So the idea of if you have multiple children, multiple eras, I guess, or generations even too, the idea of, well, one's going to have a different timeline for the money to grow. One might even have a different need, or, there might be other grandparents involved other than ourselves. So the idea of, you know what, I'm going to open an account for each of them usually makes the most sense. But like you're saying, let's say one of them had a larger leftover or something. Well, then you can pick and choose to say, let's fund or transfer funds over to these other accounts. And again, each time there's a little qualifier. For instance, if you're moving between states, there might be a penalty that, hey, I took that state income tax deduction, now I've rolled it over to another state's plan. Well, there might be a recapture of a tax bill there. So when we talk about moving money between them, just remember there are usually details here, and before you're looking at your situation, you want to make sure you know the rules in your state.
And I want to add back to the state-specific side of things with taxes. So even if you live in Texas, for example, with no income tax, you can still open a 529 for another state. Like, for example, you live in Texas, you could open an Ohio 529 plan. We've done that multiple times.
Even if you're not a resident.
Correct. And you're only getting 2 of the 3 tax benefits, though, right? There's no tax deduction up front, but you still get the tax-deferred growth and the tax-free withdrawals on the back end. So there's a lot of options.
Or this may be a dumb question, but from state to state, is there a better taxation gift?
Yeah, each is
opportunity?
different.
Like, you can get a better deal in Texas than you can in Ohio. Let's open it in Texas.
Well,
even though we live in Ohio, does that exist?
Well, for Texas, you wouldn't. Remember, there's no state taxes in Texas. So, but there are tax limitations or deductions are different state by state. So Ohio's is different than Virginia's, for example.
The real differentiator, too, sometimes, Tyler, you mentioned a lot of them are the features available in the plan.
Yeah.
So if you're in a state where there isn't a tax benefit, and let's say they really didn't invest a lot in the plan, maybe the sponsor hasn't, there's not a lot of features. Well, some of what, Tyler, you were describing, those are Ohio-specific features. So if you look at a list like a Kiplinger or some others that are available online, you can start to rank, okay, if I didn't get a benefit or a state benefit, which of these plans is going to have age benefit
That's
or
what
age
I was trying to ask.
Which
That's
one?
perfect.
Perfect. Yeah. Again, that's where you can pick and choose, and then the tax benefits at the state level, those will be unique, like Tyler was saying.
Yeah, there's a great website called savingforcollege.com, and they do a lot of what you're saying is they'll rank them, and there's all sorts of different reasons on how they categorize those things, but some of it's rate of return based on the investment, some of it's fee related. They have their different categories and how they rank them, but go to savingforcollege.com and you can click into your state and learn more about the plans that are available.
And make sure you're in touch with a CPA that can help you navigate.
Yeah, if you read the details, right at the bottom it'll always say review this with your CPA or tax professional. Yeah. So definitely.
It sounds like there are a lot of jukes. I do want to talk about the American Opportunity Tax Credit and using the 529. Is there anything that we can offer people relative to that? We're not CPAs, but outside of what you've already discussed.
Honestly, I'm not the best to explain that one, honestly, as far as details with the tax credit piece. But I think you, first and foremost, go back to your goals. We always talk about that. Center yourself around the goal. Is it the right move, or should you be paying down debt first before you look at those things? Because the tax credits can be an incentive to do things, but is that still the right move for your plan? That requires a comprehensive review of what's going on.
The same with the qualifiers.
Yeah.
So this isn't an investment account for your retirement. It's more a utilitarian account that helps somebody else is the way to look at it. Right?
Usually when we're hearing credits or things in the tax bill, it's not an account type so much as just a feature of when you're completing your taxes, whether you qualify or not. Again, there's a couple things in there that are, I'll say, a little more detailed than what we can get into.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we've already covered this last point. Let me move forward through my other conversation points.
Well,
go ahead.
No, while you're doing that, I can't help but think of some of the misnomers out there, the things that you and I have taught over the years.
How do you accidentally, you're getting ahead of me. How do you accidentally break rules by claiming tax credits and using 529 funds for the same expenses? This is something I wanted to learn more about.
Go ahead.
Accidentally breaking rules, learning more about. This is on purpose, Tracy?
Well, not intentional, accidental, right?
Well, knowing that...
Is there such a thing?
Well,
there are. Yeah.
And we mentioned earlier, keep good receipts. Keeping good receipts, even if you miscategorize something, you made a mistake, That's a lot easier to unwind it or correct it. So keep good receipts to me is number one.
Yeah, another one I've seen actually in practice too is somebody withdrew money from the account to pay for tuition, and they found out later that their son actually was qualifying for a scholarship. So he tried to figure out, can I put some of that money back into the 529 that I took out to pay tuition? And it was a whole process to go through an appeal and whatnot. So again, you can overstep or maybe be too quick on the draw to get actually pay for school. So making sure that you've got the complete breakdown from the university or whatever you're paying for before you take that money out is key, because this was a little premature. Did it like a week before he got the final official notice on what to pay for.
Oops.
And so he was stuck kind of figuring out, can I take this and put it back into the account?
And if you're sitting in a seminar somewhere and you're hearing something about paying for college and a 529 and a vacation property, and it sounds too good to be true.
A vacation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll get there. Yeah.
What?
Again, your child's going
That's
to
an
somewhere
oxymoron.
fun, going somewhere cool, San
Vacation
Diego,
in college.
Florida. No, there are people where the kid's going somewhere much more fun than where they live. So they're going to go there and they're going to buy a property. And they're going to buy that property, rent it out, and, the kid will have roommates, they'll be the landlord, etc. And there are some tax benefits if done wisely and done the right way with a lot of great accounting and a lot of great liability protection. Oh, and a lot of extra cash, because college kids don't seem to take care of properties very well. So the idea of, if you're in that seminar again and you're catching that, this sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Because when you're doing that and you're doing it the right way, you're treating it like another job. It really is a rental property. Whether that child's friend doesn't pay or not, hey, you've got to handle that like a landlord would rather than a benevolent parent. So again, be prepared. If you're going to get in there and do those kinds of things, you've got to do it all the right way. And again, sometimes it's a little more complication than what it's worth.
I think this is a whole universe outside of the universe. I think the CPA is really critical here, and your certified financial planner when it comes to time. It sounds perilous to try to navigate this alone to me.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and our job is just to help show the ropes, give guidelines, but then review with the experts, the CPA. And of course, we know a lot about these things, but we don't replace anybody in that process. So really having the team around you to make sure that it's the right recommendation is the key.
Smart planning turns scholarship surprises into opportunities. That's it for today. We hope you'll join us next time and share with your friends.
Boxland Media. Think big.